Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending our online service. We hope it's a blessing for you. Every week, you can count on us to have a worship session and a lesson here for you. We would really love it if you took time to get to know more about our church, which you can do here on our website. On our website, you can learn about our staff, missions, small groups, children, and youth ministries, as well as our college group. You can also financially support our ministry by giving here through our website. We would love to hear from you. If this is your first time watching, or if you have any prayer requests, there is a virtual connect card in the description below this video. Fill it out. We would love to be praying for you. You are always invited to attend our outdoor services for the entirety of the summer. We are meeting at 10 a.m. in our back lawn. Bring your own chair and join us. If it's not possible for you to meet with us physically, then we look forward to seeing you back here online next week. Thank you so much for being a part of our online service. Let's go ahead and get worship started.
Morning, church. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's get started with worship.
Strange in the sorrows, Lamb of God, by his own betrayed. The sin of man and wrath of God has been on Jesus laid. Silent as he stood accused, beaten, mocked, and scorned, bowing to the Father's will, he took a crown of thorns. Oh, that rugged cross, my salvation, where your love poured out over me. Now my soul cries out, hallelujah, praise and honor unto thee. Sent of heaven, God's own Son, to purchase and redeem, and reconcile the very ones who nailed him to that tree. Oh, that rugged cross, my salvation, where your love poured out over me. Now my soul cries out, hallelujah, praise and honor unto thee. Now my debt is paid, it is paid in full by the precious blood that my Jesus spilled. Now the curse of sin has no hold on me. Whom the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. Now my debt is paid, it is paid in full by the precious blood that my Jesus spilled. Now the curse of sin has no hold on me. Whom the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. Oh, the rugged cross, my salvation, where your love poured out over me. Now my soul cries out, hallelujah, praise and honor unto thee. See, the stone is rolled away. Behold the empty tomb. Hallelujah, God be praised. He's risen from the grave. Oh, that rugged cross, my salvation, where your love poured out over me. Now my soul cries out, hallelujah, praise and honor unto thee. Praise and honor unto thee.
Let's pray. God, we thank you for your death on the cross. We do give all the praise and all of the honor and all of the glory to you for what you've done for us, for who you are. We thank you for that. We thank you for the free gift of your salvation, and we just pray that you would speak to us as Pastor Brian comes to share the word with us this morning. In your name we pray. Amen.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for joining us for our online service here at Grand Avenue. I'm thankful to be with you today. Thankful for our worship team, Carrie, John, Anthony, Jason, for leading us in worship. So whenever you're watching this, maybe it's Sunday, maybe it's Monday or Tuesday, thankful that you can still be a part of our services in this way. But on this particular Sunday, July 12th, we're meeting outside as a church in our back lawn, and you're always welcome to join us all summer in our back lawn, 10 a.m. every Sunday outside. We got some tents set up, hopefully to shelter people from the sun. We have chairs for you if you need a chair, but you're always welcome to join us. But on this particular Sunday, we're baptizing people outside. I'm excited for that. Just as a church, we're going to be celebrating those who have chosen to follow God in obedience, publicly declaring their faith in baptism. Now, we're one church collectively. Whether you're here outside or there in your living room watching online, we're still one church, and we want you to celebrate along with those who are getting baptized. So as people are baptized today, our media team is going to be getting footage of that. And then they're going to put together a video for you next week. So next week in the service, our online service, a part of that will be video footage of those who got baptized today. So you'll witness it 1 week late, but we still want you to be a part of that. So look forward to that next Sunday as a part of our online edition of Grand Avenue. A couple other things before we dive into 1 Peter today. I wanted to bring your attention to two things that will be happening this summer. We're going to have 2 family nights for families to come and be a part of some gathering here at church. It's going to be on 2 different Wednesday nights, July 29th and August 19th. On July 29th, in our back lawn, you and your family can come, bring some chairs, a blanket. We're going to eat together. You bring your own food and eat, and then we're going to actually tie-dye masks together. So we're going to have the supplies for you to be able to do that as a family, and we'll socially distance out there, but be able to hang out some together, and we'll have, I think, some ice cream sandwiches or something at the end for all that just hang out. That's July 29th. On August 19th, we're going to have a family movie night, a drive-in version. So as the sun sets around 8 o'clock that night, we're going to have you come in your car. We'll broadcast the audio over FM radio. We'll have a big projection screen set up in the back grass there, and you can actually come to the drive-in movie together. We're going to get you more information about both events in the coming weeks as we get closer, but we wanted you to mark your calendars, July 29th and August 19th. And then lastly, me and my family this week, we're going to go on vacation. We're going to get out of Corvallis. So for the next 2 Sundays, Blaine is going to be preaching, both in the field on Sundays and also right here online for you. And I'm kind of jealous, he's going to wrap up 1 Peter next week, and then the following week he'll launch into 2 Peter. So I'm thankful for him that he's willing to serve you by preaching. These next 2 weeks. I'm excited. Me and my family, my kids, we're excited to get away for a little while. We need it. It's been as you know, just an exhausting couple months, and so we're excited to get away, to be refreshed, rejuvenate a little bit, and then I'll be back here the first Sunday of August. I'll be back with you again. So be praying for Blaine as he gets ready and prepares to preach next week. With all of that said, we're going to go to 1 Peter chapter 5. Today, we're going to be looking at the first 5 verses. So maybe you have your scripture journal, maybe just have your Bible, your phone, get it out. 1 Peter chapter 5. And Peter, after last week talking about suffering for our faith, the call for us to rejoice, not be surprised that we might suffer for our faith, he now transitions and begins to speak of what a healthy church looks like. He's going to describe for us what good leaders look like in the church and the call for the church as a whole to follow them. And there is a lot of unhealthy churches today. Really, churches that don't operate in a biblical way, leaders who don't operate in a biblical way, and as a response to that, then the entire church is not operating in a way that the Bible calls us to operate. And maybe you yourself even have been a part of an unhealthy church, and because of that, you have suffered. Or maybe you have suffered because you contributed to the unhealthy nature or culture of a church. It's possible, right? It's not always someone else's fault. Sometimes it's our own. But Peter is going to call us, going to describe for us what a healthy church looks like. And I'm thankful to be a part of Grand Avenue, a healthy church, a growing church that loves Jesus. But I want us to see today in 1 Peter chapter 5, what Peter might say to us and consider what it might even mean for our church. So go to 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 1. Let me read this to you. So I exhort the elders among you, as a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, as well as a partaker in the glory that is going to be revealed. Shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversights, not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly. Now, verse 3, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory. Likewise, you who are younger, be subject to the elders. Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility towards one another, for God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. I love those 5 verses. It's a pretty, honestly, straightforward passage. It is a little bit challenging maybe, and I want to explain a few things that we just read, but it's also challenging because actually the majority of this, I don't know if you caught it, the majority of this passage is actually directed towards me as the elder pastor of Grant Avenue. And so I don't want you to fall into a temptation here. It's possible that you might kind of tune out for a moment. I don't want you to do that. So just give me a few moments of your time to walk through and explain this passage to you so that we can have an understanding of what Peter is saying here. And I don't have actually, I'm not going to share for a ton of time today, mainly because the outdoor edition of church will be a lot shorter because we're baptizing, so this right here is going to be shorter as well. But Peter, he opens up in verse 1 by saying, so I exhort the elders among you. He is speaking to elders. Now, what is an elder? I don't know if you realize this, but actually in the New Testament, there are 3 terms that are kind of used interchangeably: elder, pastor, overseer. Those terms, elder, pastor, overseer, all mean the same person, all speak of the same office in the church: elder, pastor, overseer. The term elder, it does not mean here, at least, the office of elder in the church. It's not referring to someone who is older. So I just kind of want to break that maybe tendency to read this, and I exhort the elders, and you immediately think, well, anyone who maybe is a senior adult, that's who he's speaking to. That's not true at all. He's not speaking to those who are older. He's speaking to the office in the church of elder or pastor or overseer. Now, there's only 2 biblical kind of leadership offices in the church: the elder and the deacon. And we see these actually illustrated in the book of Acts when the elders are doing so much, and the elders are called. Actually, Ephesians tells us that the primary job description of an elder, of a pastor, is to train the saints for service, equip the saints, the church, to serve God. But in the book of Acts, what we see them doing is they're doing a lot of praying, they're doing a lot of teaching, this training. They're getting overwhelmed, though, by the needs of people. And so Peter directs the church to establish deacons, and these deacons will serve the people, meet the needs, both spiritually and physically, of those in the church and those in the local community there. And actually, you could read through the book of 1 Timothy, and you'll see the qualifications for both of these offices. What it means, this is what it means to be a deacon, what their life ought to look like, and this is what it means to be an elder, what their life ought to look like. I don't so much want to talk about the qualifications of an elder today, but I want you to see what an elder is to be about. So let me show you in verse 2, we'll begin here, 2 directives of the elder. Peter's going to say this is what the elder ought to be about. Number 1, he says, shepherd the flock. That's exactly what it says in verse 2, shepherd the flock of God that is among you. Shepherd the flock. Now, this idea of shepherding was a common theme in the Bible and really was easily understood to the first century believer. Because shepherding was a common thing. To shepherd was to lead the sheep, to care for the sheep, to provide for the sheep. And in the very same way, the pastor, the overseer, the elder of the church ought to be leading, caring for, providing for the people in the local church. And Peter says, shepherd the people. But notice specifically, and you could underline this, shepherd the flock of God that is among you. That the calling here for the elder is to shepherd the local church. That actually, me as an elder, a pastor in this church, I'm not responsible for people in other churches, but rather this specific church, the people among us that God has called to make up Grant Avenue Baptist Church. So shepherd the flock. And the church needs a shepherd. Need a shepherd because sheep are easily led astray, aren't they? And in the same way, we can easily be led astray, and we need a shepherd, an overseer, a pastor, so that we're not easily deceived. Sheep need good food and good water, and so a shepherd the church needs a shepherd who teaches well, who feeds well the people of God. Sheep are defenseless. They need a shepherd for protection from false teaching. Healthy churches have elders that shepherd the people well. And the only people really, if you think about it, who don't want a shepherd are those who are so prideful that they believe they have life completely figured out, the Christian life completely figured out, all of theology and doctrine completely figured out. They would not need a shepherd. But Peter sets it up here. I exhort the elders among you, shepherd, verse 2, shepherd the flock of God that is among you. But then he says a second thing. Here's the second directive of the elder. Exercising oversight. Exercise oversight. Give direction, or maybe modern day language, cast vision for the church. Now, this isn't a call, if you notice, for the pastor to do everything, but to exercise oversight over everything, to oversee what is happening. Ultimately, the elders are the ones responsible for what is happening in the local church. They're responsible, for example, of what's being taught at all levels. So our church, we have a children's ministry director, Carrie, who does an awesome job leading our children. And she puts together curriculum, and she gets teachers together and teaches our kids. But ultimately, it is the elders in the church that are responsible for overseeing that. Right? Same with our college ministry. Elena does an amazing job of leading our college ministry. But there is still a burden on the elders to oversee it. Not to direct everything that happens, but to oversee, to make sure there's no false teaching that is happening, to make sure that people are being cared for well, being shepherded well. So it's not the pastor would do everything, but certainly the elders would be overseeing what is happening. Now, I want to bring this to your attention because I think this is really important. If you notice in verse 1, so I exhort the elders, it is plural, elders among you. I don't know if you realize this, but every time in the New Testament that the New Testament authors speak of elders, pastors, or overseers, it was always done so in the plural. Just like right here in 1 Peter, I exhort the elders among you. In Titus, when Paul is writing to Titus about elders, he says, appoint elders in every city, plural again. In each of these churches that are set up in cities, would there be a plurality of elders? In the book of Acts chapter 20, when Paul is writing to the elders, plural, in the church of Ephesus, he refers to in a plural way. In fact, later in that chapter, he refers to them as overseers, plural again. There is this kind of a common practice theme that runs through the New Testament, that there are elders, plural, in the church. Now, here's the problem for Grand Avenue. Seriously, the problem. When Pastor Don retired last fall, it left our church with only one elder, only one pastor, only one overseer, me. But I actually don't think that is the way that God designed the church to be, that the pattern of the New Testament is that the church would be led by a plurality of elders. And so I've already brought this up in our last deacon meeting with our deacons who just do a phenomenal job here at our church of caring for and serving you and kind of talking through what that might be. And so we're just praying through how it is we ought to move forward. I'm praying that God would call elders from within our midst that would rise up to this calling, that would meet the qualifications of 1 Timothy, and then would help to shepherd and to exercise oversight over our church. It's the way God has designed it. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a paid position like a pastor professionally like me, but there is a need in our church for a plurality of elders. That's the example that we see in the New Testament. So there's a directive here that the elders would shepherd, would exercise oversight. But now I want you to catch the 3 warnings that are given to these elders. Warning number 1, don't lead because you must. Look what it says, not under compulsion, but willingly as God would have you. And now when I first read this, I thought, that's ridiculous. Who would ever have be forced into being a pastor? Is there really someone holding a gun to a pastor's head saying, you better be a pastor or else? That's not true, right? But it is possible, very possible, for a pastor to lead out of a place of burnout, of spiritual dryness, that they actually eventually end up hurting the church, hurting the people in that church because they don't really want to be there. The act of shepherding and overseeing becomes this undesired burden. I have felt that before. That's why I have to check my heart on a regular basis. Is this God has called me to be an elder at Grant Avenue. Do I desire it? Am I willing to do that? Because here's the truth. We know this in churches, right? People are a pain sometimes, and shepherding them is difficult. Leading a church is tiring. It's exhausting. And if I'm not careful, I will begin to see my role as an elder as an obligation, not a joyful privilege. But God has called elders to do it out of a willingness. It's a high calling to lead a church. And my heart breaks for these pastors who become so jaded that they say leading is something they have to do, not something that they're willing to do. I was in college, and I went to college to be a pastor. Day 1 of undergrad in ministry class, we were told that only 10% of the people in this room that would become pastors, only 10% would retire as a pastor. Only 1 in 10 would make it all the way through. Now, there's a lot of good reasons because that people might stop being a pastor. They might change professions for a good reason. Maybe God has called them to a season of pastoring and a season of doing something else. But there are many men who are called to be an elder who don't make it because they forget that it's a joyful privilege and begin to see it as an obligation. So we want elders in our church who consider it a joyful privilege to lead God's people. There's a second warning that is given here, not for shameful gain, but eagerly. And so I said it this way, warning, don't lead because you are greedy. And Peter knows what Martin Luther revealed in the Catholic Church prior to the Reformation. Peter knows what we see too often in Christianity today, that pastors can leverage religion to get rich. That pastors can leverage their teaching and the Bible just to get more money. The Catholic Church, this is what Martin Luther was so offended by. The Catholic Church would sell indulgences to make right the people's sin. Literally, you sin, give us $50 and we will make it right before God. Think about prosperity gospel preachers today. They'll say things like this, sow a financial seed and it'll come back to you by way of a promotion or a raise or a new house or that disease you have will get healed. Just give us a little bit more money out of faith. But all these leaders are doing is chasing after greed, more money. They're not actually caring about shepherding the people, overseeing the people. They're about advancing themselves. So the warning he gives these elders is don't lead because you're greedy. Here's the heart check. Does the elder really want to serve the people? It says here, not for shameful gain, but eagerly. The NIV says, but serving eagerly. They're eager to serve. Does the elder really want to sacrifice himself for the people? Jesus said of himself, right, I did not come to be served, but to serve people. And this is the leader that you and I want to follow. Elders aren't called to make decisions that everyone likes. Elders are always making decisions. Not everyone's going to be happy with them, but elders are called to serve everyone in the church, to teach them and equip them spiritually so they can live out their faith in everyday life. Here's the third warning that's given. Don't abuse your leadership. Verse 3, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. Any position of authority can quickly become a seat of dominance, and so Peter warns the elder against this. In contrast to abusing power, he actually says, be an example. And here's what it means. Instead of domineering over people, forcing them to act a certain way, obey God in a certain way, I should be an example to them. Like how I raise my kids, how I love my wife, how I speak to others, how I walk in holiness, how I give to my church, how I share my faith, how I love my neighbors. All of it, I should live in such a way as an elder of Grand Avenue that is an example to you. So instead of beating you over the head, share your faith, domineering over you in that way, I should just live an example. Look, this is what it looks like to be one who shares their faith. And so the warnings are given by Peter here. Elders, careful. Don't lead because you must. Don't lead out of greed. Don't abuse your leadership, but in contrast, be willing. Serve the people. Lead by example. Now look at the promise that is given to these elders in verse 4. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory. This is the reward of the faithful elder, the crown of glory. But I want to point out the beginning of that verse because I've kind of left this out until this moment. And when the chief shepherd appears, the chief shepherd, meaning this, that elders, pastors, overseers, this person, me, I am just an under-shepherd of the true chief shepherd. This isn't my church. The church is not the elders' church. The church is not the pastor's church. The church is God's church. This is Jesus' church that he is building, and elders are called to be an under-shepherd under him. And if they do it well, they will receive the promise, the reward, the crown of glory. But now look at verse 5, because finally we get to the response of the people. Likewise, you who are younger, be subject to the elders. Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility towards one another, for God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So here's the church's response, really simple. The church's response, submit in humility. Submit in humility. If the elders are exercising oversight and shepherding the people well, the people should submit to that. And in our culture, when we hear the word submit or be subject to, we say something like this, no one's going to tell me what to do. But that is not actually a biblical response. It's a prideful response, which is why Peter says here, no, humble yourselves. Clothe yourselves in humility towards one another. Now look at the opening part there of verse 5. Likewise, you who are younger. Now this can be a little bit confusing and hard to process because that word younger. Now most scholars agree. You can go read some commentaries and see about this. But most scholars agree that Peter is speaking generically of all those under the authority of elders, not just those who would be younger than an elder. This is not a reference to age. This is about those who God has placed under the elder, the pastor's authority in the church. And so he says, subject yourselves to that authority, to the elder. Live under their leadership, not because the elder is perfect, but because it is the way that God has called the church to exist in the first place. But there's a requirement here for all of us, and that's what I want to call us to. The requirement is humility. Now, verse 6 actually picks up on this theme of humility. In verse 6, humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God. And Blaine is going to start there next week in verse 6 when he preaches. And so I don't want to steal his thunder in talking about humility. So let me just make this simple call to us. Would you clothe yourself in humility? And this is actually a command that is given not just to the church as a whole, but to the elders as well. that we would treat each other, respond to one another in a humility-driven way. That's the church's response. Submit in humility. You know, Jesus told Peter, on this rock, I will build my church. And then Peter writes this letter to the churches that are scattered abroad, living in exile. They are far from home. And he says to them, this is what a healthy church looks like. This is how I designed it to operate, for there to be a plurality of elders who lead, who shepherd and oversee the church, and then that the church would submit to their leadership because they're good leaders, and the church would begin to grow and would be healthy. There's a lot of things the church ought to be about. We ought to be about discipleship. We ought to be about evangelism and missions. We ought to be about caring for one another, meeting the needs of one another, but also in our community. Those are all the makeup of a healthy church. And Peter says to us, this is how a healthy church is actually designed to operate. This is what it will look like when it comes to kind of like a church government sense, that there would be elders. There would be elders who would shepherd and oversee the church. And then the church as a whole, in humility, would submit to that. That's the call. That's what it says in 1 Peter. And so that's what I would call us to as well. Thanks for joining us today online. We're disappointed that you weren't able to maybe join us outside for our baptisms. We're going to have a video for you next week so that you can celebrate along with us what God is doing in people's lives. Take a moment, pray with the people that you're with. And we'll look for you back here next week. Blaine will be bringing the word, and we'll hope to see you there. Thanks for joining us.